Hello, everybody. So this is a test. Today I'll be presenting about broadening participation in technology policy. My name is Dr. Briana Posadas, and I will be going over some of the reasons why I think a lot of us in this space and in that data science and AI should really consider career opportunities in policy. And I'm going to explain a little bit of why I think we should do that. So first is the famous Facebook congressional hearing in 2018 for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And it became very apparent at this point in time of history that Congress was very ill-equipped to handle the technical questions. That a lot of them didn't have even a basic understanding of how Facebook worked. And I mean, they didn't, we're not able to use this hearing to the best, the fullest extent possible. And they were not really able to hold Zuckerberg accountable for what had happened. As much as we would like to, or as much as even I would like to fault the Congress people for not having these expertise, Congress people themselves don't have to be experts in every single thing. Um, I mean, that's why they hire advisors, that's why they have staff, and the people they surround themselves with are supposed to be informing their decision making. Travis Moore had a really great quote about how even even though they do have experts for different domains, software, computer science, technology isn't one of those domains that can be siloed. It is now creeping into every single domain, and so you really need to have a full understanding of the technology to understand all aspects of what Congress makes laws on. And just so a few examples of some different industries in which AI and machine learning have become more apparent. Some of these we all are probably familiar with, but I was going to go over them anyways. So recruitment algorithms, a lot of companies now are starting to use software to pre-read resumes, pre-read CVs, and sort through and to pick out the ones that would be from potential employees, future employees who would be the best match for the company. Um, these algorithms, just like most algorithms in every other industry, fall prey to the historical bias. So if you're training the algorithm based on the makeup of your company now, and your company right now is not very diverse, then the algorithm is more likely to start to weed out people who don't look like everybody else in your company. So you're going to miss out on a lot of different potentially great employers. If your company historically doesn't hire from like Howard University or other HBCUs, the algorithm is going to filter out people who have that on their resume, and so you're also going to miss out on some really great employees. And so this is an example of where you do need to understand how these machine learning algorithms are working and how they can potentially be disproportionately affecting communities of color. Another industry is agriculture. This is an industry near and dear to my heart in the research that I do. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't think about as being highly technical, but it is modern technology. Modern agriculture uses a lot of technology. There is so much data that's being collected in all the farms. It's predicted by 2025 that the average size farm will produce more than 1 million ag data points. Um, and a lot of this data they use, to create algorithms to better inform where to put like fertilizer and water and herbicide and things like that in the field. The thing is that all this data is not useful unless it is tied to GPS coordinates, which then makes it personal information. And right now it is unregulated. There are no laws to protect the data. There's no law saying that companies that take this data to create the algorithms, there's no law saying that they have to protect it like personal data. And so they're susceptible to hacks, and they're susceptible to farmers having their information out there that maybe they don't want out there. And a lot of times they don't really have any choice, or they're not really even told that their data is being taken from them. So a whole host of issues here in agriculture as well. And so if you're a congressperson, there's agriculture in every state. As a congressperson, if you don't have basic understanding of ag, you're not going to understand that there's a lot of tech in ag right now that you also need to be well versed in. And lastly, I'm going to go, this is as of today, is a pretty recent example for contact tracing. And for contact tracing for COVID-19. And so back in May, Google and Apple were creating contact tracing apps in order to, track the spread, track and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. This too had a lot of different issues. The system that they came up with seemed like it would work well in terms of keeping it anonymous. You would be giving like these different tokens, and then you'd be told if you ended up testing positive, then the token would they would look at how your token interacted with other tokens and alert those people that they had been exposed. But this all really depended on, a person having a smartphone, which in communities of color is not always an assumption you can make. For example, I have Theos who don't have smartphones. And I have Theos who are essential workers. And so, for them, this wouldn't work for them at all. They would be, they're more exposed to people. The potential for them to be exposed to COVID-19 is higher because of the line of work that they do. But then they don't even have an app. They don't even have a phone that would help them to keep track of how they were being exposed. This really relies on the system that they were creating really relied on Bluetooth technology. Bluetooth and GPS location technology on phones isn't entirely accurate. So if you think about if you live in an apartment, if you are a family who lives in an apartment and maybe you did the isolation part really well and you never went out, but your next door neighbor ended up being positive. For that to be flagged for you as like you were potentially exposed is misleading. As far as we know, as of today, COVID doesn't travel through walls. So it would be giving you a false positive. Or, what was the other example? I think that was mostly it. So once again, there's an example of in healthcare of how this technology, the technology that we are proposing to use to solve problems in healthcare are not really taking into account the situations of communities of color. So what can we do about this? Why are these technologies affecting communities of color? And a lot of it is because we're not at the table. We are not there creating this technology. We're not there to inform the creation of the algorithms. I feel like I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this have had experiences either in the classroom or at their jobs where you might have been the only person of color in the room. You might have been the only person of color on your team in a group project, and when you're creating something together, maybe something came up that the other people didn't think about. One situation I can remember for myself from school, we were creating like a parking app, and one team of all men got up and presented their app where the app would alert you if somebody was walking back to their car so that you could follow them to take their spot when they left. And automatically, my heart just stopped because as a woman thinking about being in that situation where I'm walking back to my car, I've been in lab late at night and all of a sudden like this car is going to follow me to my parking spot. It seemed like a terrible, terrible idea. But as a group of men, like, why would they think of that? Why would that be a situation if they've never been in that situation before? If they've never been afraid in a situation like that before, why would they consider that? So that's just one example. I'm sure there's plenty others I'm not thinking of right now. So that's part of it. We're not creating it, and our experiences are not reflected in the technology. And also, we're not representing the data set. Like I was explaining for the hiring algorithm, if we're not represented in the historical data, in which the algorithm is being built on top of, then yeah, we're not going to be well served by the output. So what we need, is we need more computer scientists of color working in these realms, working to inform the policy that looks back and regulates these industries, which is basically every industry is now going to have this huge technological component. And so because of this, the Media Democracy Fund created the PhDX program. It's a fellowship program to provide experiences to computer scientists of color who want to work in the public interest. So it's a summer program for PhD students in computer science or in the STEM fields who are also people of color who, want to be exposed to how can we use our talents in the policy realm. And for me, this was really my first exposure to tech policy. I had never considered working in that realm before, didn't really know what it entailed. And I did this program for 2 summers, and now I'm a postdoc at the Media Democracy Fund, so I can say that it was a pretty good introduction into this industry. And so for me, my first summer at Upturn, I did a lot. I feel like I was able to accomplish a lot and really see how valuable my skill sets was in this realm. So when I first started, the Chicago Police Department had just released the data set for their strategic subjects list. So if anybody isn't familiar with it, the Chicago Police Department had a predictive policing program. So they had all this data on a lot of people in the city of Chicago. And then they had an algorithm, which they didn't tell anybody how it worked. And then out you would get a score. And then the score would categorize you as, likely to commit a crime or not likely to commit a crime. And so in the program, if you had a high score, the police would come to your house before you commit a crime. The idea was like that they would come and be like, hey, you have these high risk factors, maybe reconsider some things and maybe don't commit a crime. I don't know. It wasn't very clear actually what the police did with this data. So that was the other part, is it wasn't clear how you got your score, and then it wasn't really clear what the police did with the information. So with the data set, I reverse engineered it to try to, from the score to the data, to try to figure out exactly how the algorithm worked. And what I found was that a lot of the scores was highly correlated with age. So the younger you were, the more likely you were to have a higher score, which is also a common theory in crime, in criminal studies. Like some people like age out of crime. Like you're more likely to commit a crime when you're younger, and maybe you're not thinking much about the consequences and things like that. And so I was doing that. We wrote it up. We published it. We were like 2 days behind the New York Times, who were doing exactly the same thing and also came to the same conclusions. So that was really, eye-opening to see, like, that. I mean, this is something that is affecting people every day. And actually, earlier this year in 2020, the police department actually ended the program. So that was really great. And I like to think that, my piece had a little bit to do with them shutting it down. A lot of the stuff I did that summer was around policing. I know policing is a huge topic right now. It's been a huge problem, especially with the increase of technology. The pretrial risk assessments, I did some research into that. This is where I have this research is where I really did see, firsthand the reason why we need more people of color in this area. So I went to Philadelphia to meet with some of the activists who were working to, dismantle the pretrial risk assessment in Philadelphia. So if you don't know what the pretrial risk assessment is, so if you get arrested, they have you fill out a questionnaire, and then it runs through some algorithm, and then it outputs whether or not, how likely you are to commit a crime before you come back for your hearing or your trial or whatever it is. And typically, as expected, this algorithm is based off of historical data, which is biased, And so people of color who go through this algorithm tend to be ranked more likely to commit a crime, even though that's not true. Um, there's a lot of different reasons why people don't come back for their hearings that are not crime related. Sometimes it's you move and you don't get the notice. Sometimes it's you don't have childcare, so you can't make it. Sometimes it's if I go to the hearing and I miss a day of work, I lose my job. So there's a lot of good reasons why people wouldn't come. It's not because they're dangerous criminals. So I was in this meeting and looking around the room, not only was I the only person of color in the room, but I was also the only computer scientist in the room. And the activists were actually like misusing machine learning terms as they were talking about the algorithm and the negative impacts it had on the community. And that really demonstrated to me like, yeah, they need more people like me in this area um, because they are not making informed um, decisions right now without having the proper understanding of the technology. And then lastly, I had this here. I did some work on the body-worn cameras, looking at, the policies and regulations around them. It's not just, you slap a camera on somebody and everything's good. And I think we're all pretty aware of that. And every department basically has like their own set of rules of like when should the camera be turned on, how do you access it if you have an encounter with the police, do you have the right to go to the station and request the footage, how long do you hold on to the footage, all those types of things that we gotta sit down and think through. And so we did some work there and looking at what were some of the best policies around the cameras, because if it's a tool that they're going to use, if it's a tool that people are going to insist on using, we need to have some stringent regulations around it. And so that was my experience with PhDX. I wanted to highlight another really great tech policy program, Tech Congress. So Travis Moore, who I quoted way in the beginning, he is the founder of Tech Congress. Um, they have a couple of different fellowships, but this one is you actually work with a congressperson. During normal times, you would actually go, and work on the Hill. I think they've transitioned to doing stuff more remotely. They have different fellowships for graduate students. They have fellowships for mid-career. So they've had people who've come, from Silicon Valley, who've been there for 10 years. They come and they work on the Hill with a congressperson, and then they end up staying, staying in DC. So I think that's pretty cool. They started in 2016, and they've had 39 fellows so far. Some other policy fellowships I want to also highlight: Coding It Forward, Pivot to Civic, Citizen Lab, the Ford Foundation Technology Fellows, and the Mozilla Fellows. Um, we can talk more about these in the Q&A section. And so that is the conclusion of my presentation, and I hope we have some great discussion after this. If you want to contact me, that's my email address and my website. I look forward to seeing you all in real life.